Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Welcome to Kitsap Unitarian Universalist Fellowship. Whoever you are and wherever you come from, for this hour we here are one gathered congregation and all are welcome. I invite you to follow along in the order of service. For those of you attending virtually, all the links for this service, including the order of service, are on our website and in this morning's worship service email. If you are here in the sanctuary this morning, please silence your cell phones. My name is Robin Singh, and I've been attending KUUF since 2019, and I have served on the Fun and Frolic Committee, the Worship Committee, the Ministerial Search Committee, and I'm a current board member. Our worship leader this morning is Reverend Amanda Aikman. Reverend Amanda, a retired UU minister, served churches in the Pacific Northwest and Canada for 25 years. She's currently writing a novel. I'd like to welcome any visitors. If you are here in person, we would all love to welcome you outside after the service. And if you are attending virtually, please introduce yourselves after the service at our Zoom coffee hour. Everyone is welcome to attend our Zoom coffee hour directly after the service. The link is in the email that went out this morning and will show on your screen following the worship service. You may need to use the password coffee, spelled with a capital C, to be admitted to the coffee hour. Announcements are available on our website, www.kuuf.org, or in our weekly email newsletter, The Candle. And I have a special announcement, and that is that next Sunday, service will begin at 9:30 a.m. We will be live streaming the UUA General Assembly, and then afterward, there will be a finger food potluck and strawberry shortcake. And now we acknowledge that the land on which we gather is the Aboriginal territory of the Suquamish people. Expert fishermen, canoe builders, and basket weavers, the Suquamish live in harmony with the lands and waterways along Washington's central Salish Sea, as they have for thousands of years. Here, the Suquamish live and protect the land and waters of their ancestors for future generations, as promised by the Point Elliott Treaty of 1855. Now, please stand as you're willing and able to sing our musical call to worship, hymn number 128, For All That Is Our Life. Join me now in lighting our chalice. If you have your own chalice or candle at home, please light it as I read our chalice lighting words. Symbol of light and knowledge, symbol of warmth and freedom, we light this chalice as a symbol of our faith. Here we gather to celebrate hope and the infinite possibilities of love. Please join me in the spoken affirmation. The words will appear on the screen. We gather as a caring community, seeking life's deeper meanings. We value the diversity and affirm the worth of all living things. We strive to speak truth in love, to act for justice, to grow in spirit, and to care for the earth. We celebrate with open hearts and minds the creative power that sustains and transforms us. Now, Melinda Hughes, our Director of Religious Education, will share our time for all ages.
Good morning, everyone. Back in March, when I was looking for a story for another service, I came across this book, Opal Lee. And I'm curious, have any of you heard of Opal Lee? Oh, a couple people. So Opal Lee is quite an amazing woman. She's now 95. She began a movement when she was 86, deciding that some change needed to be made. So first I'm going to read the story, and then I'll tell you a little bit more. The true story of the grandmother of Juneteenth, Opal Lee, and what it means to be free. Happy Juneteenth Jamboree! Come and join the fun! Opal Lee waved to her great-grandson as he barreled across the park. He zipped past lines of picnic tables covered with platters of barbecue, baked beans, tomato tarts, and raspberry cobbler. He hurried past a leaping choir draped in purple robes. He danced a jig with cowboys playing fiddles, but they did not stop his flow. Buddy ran to the blooming tree where Opal Lee held court. Her braided hair was a silver crown. Her eyes were twinkling stars. Great-granddear, Buddy called, tell us a Juneteenth story. Opal Lee raised her face to the sun as memories of yesteryear filled her vision. When she had been a Texas bud like the children at her feet, Granddaddy Zach told freedom stories on his wooden porch. As Opal Lee remembered his words, she lifted her hands and cheered, Juneteenth means freedom, and now it's story time. Then Opal Lee began. Once upon a blazing sun, black bodies were bought and sold like cattle. Black men plowed the fields, but were not allowed to own the land. Black women cooked the food, but were not allowed to feast on roast and ribs from the master's table. Black children cleaned the one-room schoolhouses, but were not allowed to read or write. Earning and learning were against the law. Slavery was a thief. American slavery dragged on like a plague until January 1st, 1863. That's when President Lincoln wielded courage and raised his feathered pen. He signed the Emancipation Proclamation with a mighty stroke. On the first day of January, in the year of our Lord 1863, all persons held as slaves shall be forever free. Glory, 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 freedom was dazzling news like a bright, starry night. However, Texas was big and many, many miles away from Mr. Lincoln. White masters defied his words. Black bodies remained in bondage. They plowed, they cooked, they cleaned. Freedom did not ring through Texas in 1863. It was toiling times in the Lone Star State for 2 years, 5 months, and 18 more weary days. Then, finally, joy jumped up on dancing feet in the Gulf town of Galveston. The year was 1865. The day was June 19th. Gordon Granger marched through Galveston with Union Army troops. The general raised his booming voice and spoke these righteous words. The people of Texas are informed that, in accordance with a proclamation from the Executive of the United States, all slaves are free. Opally danced in a circle. Freedom, hope, and joy divine. Juneteenth means it's freedom time. Can you imagine the excitement? Singing filled the air, happy tears rolled down like rain. Black families leapt through cotton fields and played tambourines. It was a day of jubilee, perfect for Texas barbecue, watermelon, and sweet potato pie, delicious delights they had been denied during servitude. Opal Lee told the children, "Remember my words for safekeeping. Remember what I say. Juneteenth is bigger than Texas, singing, or dancing bands. Juneteenth is freedom rising, and freedom is for everyone. Juneteenth is you and me." As the children clapped and cheered, Buddy tugged her sleeve. "Great granddear," he called, "what was Juneteenth like when you were a kid?" Opal Lee unwrapped another story. Blacks and whites lived separately when I was a child. Jim Crow signs littered Old Fort Worth in every public place. Black families were banned from Forest Park Zoo except one day of the year. On Juneteenth, we could picnic, party, and ride the Ferris wheel. I hated that zoo. I loved it too. The birdhouse was my favorite. But he groaned and shook his head. The old days don't sound good. Good and bad work together like the sun and rain. I spent good days on my granddaddy's porch reading poetry books. His farm was my playground. I ran across the fields and climbed the tallest oak. Glory, glory, glory. Some memories are chocolate sweet, but some memories cut and bruise. My saddest season started on Juneteenth Day, 1939. An angry mob with flaming sticks burned my family's brand new house. Their broken minds and evil hearts were so afraid of Black progress. The police made no arrests. My family moved away. And yet the embers burn. That fire still lives in me. I learned a big lesson that Juneteenth day. Freedom is a golden coin. Struggle makes it shine. And no matter how long it takes for freedom to stretch across the land, I will keep on teaching. I will keep on reaching. I will keep on walking. I will keep on talking. I will raise my voice on the prairie and the mountaintop until freedom rings. The children lifted their hands in praise. Freedom, hope, and joy divine. Juneteenth means it's freedom time. Opal Lee winked and chuckled. I think now it's time for barbecue, strawberry cake, and red Juneteenth punch. Glory, 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 Buddy cheered and waved his hands. When he bounced up to leave, Opal Lee hugged him tightly. Then, just like birds in flight, all the children flocked into her arms. Opal Lee studied their shining faces, black, brown, bronze, gold, tan, white, freckles. As the children dashed away, she marveled at the bright future. She rested against the blooming tree and whispered into the wind, "Remember my words for safekeeping. Remember what I say. Freedom is for everyone. Juneteenth is you and me." So then I think at the end of the slide, that's a picture of Opal Lee, and I was reading a little bit about her, and what's amazing is she's called the grandmother of Juneteenth because when she was 85 or 86, she decided Juneteenth needed to be made into a national holiday. And last year, President Joe Biden, with Opal Lee by his side, she's now 95, signed the proclamation that Juneteenth is now a national holiday. So this year is the first year that Juneteenth is recognized as a national holiday. She marched, it was called Opal's March to Washington, or Opal's March to DC. She would march 2.5 miles at a time to represent the 2.5 years it took for slavery to end in Texas. And while she didn't march the whole 1,400 miles from Fort Worth, Texas, she marched 2.5 miles at a time. She would go to different towns, different cities, and march with the people there, 2.5 miles. And for that reason, Opal Lee is the grandmother of Juneteenth. Now I would like to invite Lenny Barone up to read a couple of poems about Juneteenth.
I have two readings this morning. The first is entitled, "This is What Juneteenth Means to Me" by Abby Strong. Juneteenth means the end of madness, the end of the insanity that a person can own another, that one person can possess another's identities and ideas, the delusion that because of the amount of melanin in one's skin, they can dictate the life of another. Juneteenth means the joy of freedom, the ability to be one's own true self, the retraction of the limitations that others place upon oneself, the exploration of owning one's own distinctiveness. The second reading is a poem entitled "We Rose." It has been called one of the official poems of Juneteenth, and it was written in 1996 by artist and writer Christina K. Robinson at the age of 9. In the years since, she has gone on to write, produce, and perform numerous productions recognized nationally and abroad. It goes like this. From Africa's heart, we rose. Already a people, our faces ebony, our bodies lean, we rose. Skills of art, life, beauty, and family, crushed by forces we knew nothing of, we rose. Survive we must, survive we did. We rose. We rose to be you, we rose to be me. Above everything expected, we rose. To become the knowledge we never knew, we rose. Dream we did, act we must. Thank you.
Now we'll sing our children's recessional as the children. Oh, okay, we're skipping it. Okay.
We have little ones, they're already up there.
Okay. So our next hymn, "Just as Long as I Have Breath," has lyrics written in the 20th century by UU songwriter Alicia S. Carpenter, set to 17th century music. Please stand as you're willing and able to sing hymn number 6, "Just as Long as I Have Breath." Now it is time for our morning offering. If your offering is for KUUF, please put it in the envelope in the baskets. Loose change, cash, or checks placed in the basket will go to this month's recipient of our charitable giving recipient, the NAACP Bremerton Unit 1134. If this is your first time at KUUF, you are our guest and there is no need to contribute. Let there be an offering to strengthen and sustain our community, which is sacred to so many of us. Let's enjoy a gift of music from our pianist, Brian Kenny, In the Cold Moonlight by Henry T. Burley. Thank you, Brian. Now is the time for our joys and sorrows. When shared together, our joys are amplified and our sorrows lessened. With joy today, we celebrate fathers and other nurturers, those who support, guide, encourage, and care for the children in their lives. The love they share with the next generation is their legacy. And we have a joy from Ellie Klausmeinzer. Hobie Denny is joining all 5 generations of his family on this father's, grandfather's, great-grandfather's, and great-great-grandfather's day. And we have a joy from Bonner, and his joy is that Gay Bingo, played this past Friday, was a success. It was the first time in 15 years since last played in Kitsap County. And we have a joy from Susan Weinstein. Attending Darlene Johnsrud's memorial service reminded me of how fortunate I was to be a member for so many years of this treasured fellowship. The physical setting is beautiful, and more beautiful is the community that creates and supports like-minded people caring for each other and the world at large in many ways. And I have a joy to share, and that is for the job that I will be starting this week with the Suquamish tribe. And we light one last candle for those joys and sorrows that are still too tender to share. Please join me in a moment of prayer or intention. In the spirit of community in which we find strength and common purpose, we share our joys, our sorrows, our hopes and dreams. We have turned our minds and hearts toward one another in trust, giving love, seeking comfort, and celebrating together. We are part of the web of life that makes us one with all humanity, one with all the universe. In all the moments of our lives, for those loved ones and events shared this morning, and for those we yet hold in the silence of our hearts. We are truly grateful for the love and support of this beloved community. May the spirit of life and love bring peace to us all. Amen, and blessed be. Please remain seated as we sing Spirit of Life, hymn number 123 in our gray hymnal. For those of you at home, the words will appear on the screen.
Good morning. My name is Amanda Aikman. I haven't been here for about 4 years, so it's nice to see you today. And this is, I'd like to invite you into another moment of prayer, especially for this day. Ground of all being, great nurturing spirit, this morning especially, we give thanks for these days right in between spring and summer, for flowers and green trees and freshly cut grass, for the blessing of being together in this place and in this moment, and for all who father, for all who have warm and loving relationships with their fathers and children, we give thanks. For those who, for whatever reason, did not know their fathers, we remember that this can be an uncomfortable day for you and others, and we hold you in our hearts. And for those whose relationships with their fathers or children is painful or complicated, we support you. This Father's Day, we lift up our gratitude for all kinds of fathers and for the amazing ways fatherly love transcends bloodlines and legal categories. Let's just take a moment to think about those we think of as fathers for us. Send them love or forgiveness. And we pray for peace, peace in Ukraine, peace in the United States, peace in our communities, peace in every heart. For these and for all of the hopes and aches and prayers of our own hearts, we pray for love's sake. Amen. And let's take just a moment of shared silence and then join in singing Filled with Loving Kindness. First reading is by Lisa Cron. She is a woman who teaches people how to write movie scripts. This is from her book, Story Genius. Why do normally responsible adults like you and me check out of reality so completely when we're under the spell of a compelling story? That's something evolutionary biologists have been wondering about for a long time, and with good reason, because staying up all night to finish reading that novel was definitely counterproductive. But hey, at least you survived to see the dawn. Back in the Stone Age, making it through the night was a much dicier proposition, and putting reality on hold for even a moment left you vulnerable to all sorts of pouncing predators, human or otherwise. In other words, getting lost in a story could be deadly, which is why scientists figured there had to be a damn good reason for it. There is a damn good reason. Story was the world's first virtual reality. It allowed us to step out of the present and envision the future so that we could plan for the thing that has always scared us more than anything, the unknown, the unexpected. What better way to figure out how to outsmart those potential pouncing predators before they sneak up behind you? Stories let us vicariously try out difficult situations we haven't yet experienced to see what it would really feel like and what we'd need to learn in order to survive. So it's no surprise that there's never been a society on Earth that didn't have storytelling. The second reading is, very briefly, The 5 Points of the New Theology by James Freeman Clarke from 1886, which is my favorite decade in history. This faith statement by Clarke, who was one of the most popular and prolific Unitarian ministers and writers of the late 19th century, this summed up the beliefs that he hoped would be the basis of a new universal religion. The fatherhood of God, the brotherhood of man, the leadership of Jesus, salvation by character, and the continuity of human development in all worlds, or the progress of mankind onward and upward forever. Rousing stuff, so in the readings. Well, if you've ever stayed up late to read just one more chapter, or binged a TV series to see what happens to those characters, you know the power of narrative. I'm a recovering playwright, now writing a novel, I'm passionate about the power of story, and it's so mysterious, and yet we all know how to do it. So I'm curious about how it works, and that book I just quoted, Story Genius, unpacks the reason that narrative, story, has such a grip on us. Stories exist to help us survive, to enable us to play out in our imaginations how we would respond to threats. Whether they're existential threats, like the saber-toothed tiger that attacked your clan's last mammoth hunting crew, or social threats, like the divorcee who's been flirting with your spouse at coffee hour. We turn to story to help us plan for the future, to help us know what to do, to ensure our personal and collective survival. The next time you're gripped by a story, see if you can notice how it is actually helping you learn how to survive. As we face a dismal array of existential threats to our survival, the ongoing threat of the pandemic, the threat of the worldwide erosion of democracy, the threat of climate change, we turn to story to show us scenarios of how we might respond, how we might survive. Brain studies reveal that when we're reading or watching a story, our brain activity is not that of an observer, but of a participant. If you don't believe it, any horror movie fans here? Don't be shy. 1, okay, 2, all right, some of you are a little nervous about it. I think you're weird, but anyway, when you get, no, I don't really, I'm doing check-in. But when you again feel safe to do so, watch a horror movie at your local theater. Now, when the monster is slashing away at some poor, helpless victim who's trying desperately to get away, if you can tear your eyes away from the screen, look around at your fellow moviegoers. Chances are you'll see them squirming in their seats. They pull in their elbows and scrunch up their knees, trying to protect their vital organs. It's puzzling. Clearly, these are smart people who've seen a movie before. Why would they feel they had to protect themselves from what's happening on the screen? The answer is they're not thinking at all. They're experiencing the action as if it were really happening to them. Their brains are instructing their bodies to do all the things they would do if they were actually under mortal attack. Flight simulators train airline pilots to deal with a variety of situations. What do you do when this red light comes on and this buzzer starts buzzing? Flight simulators. Stories are human life simulators. As the heroine of the tale faces down the predatory stalker, we watch and identify with her and see what she does, and our brains actually experience the same sensations and emotions that we'd have if it were happening to us in real life. We unconsciously integrate that information into ourselves so that when we get into our own next scary situation, speaking personally, the spider in the shower is a classic for me, we might find that, this hasn't happened for me yet, but we might find that we have access to surprising courage from within. In the case of the global coronavirus pandemic, there are many movies and novels and board games that reproduce the fight that humanity undertakes in the face of contagions. In the case of threats to democracy, we might turn to stories of other times people have faced down fascism to see what they did and how they fared. You need only look at the offerings on Netflix and Amazon Prime to see how many movies and shows there are about World War II, to see the great appeal of this particular genre of story. But for climate change, which is unprecedented in our experience, we turn to science fiction and fantasy. The topic of the science fiction or fantasy story does not have to explicitly be climate change, The topic might be alien invasions or outbreaks of new diseases or good old zombies, anything that is unprecedented, new, a novel danger. We want to see stories about people like us facing these new dangers. Science fiction and fantasy are our new mythologies. They are showing us alternatives, different ways to respond to the threats of the future. Whether you are a fan or not, these new mythologies permeate our culture, and I believe that they're tremendously important in training us to develop the capacities to deal with the threats and challenges of the future. The stories we tell and absorb are very important. They influence the future of humanity and of the world. My friend Bill, who lives in a rural area of an island that shall be nameless, a little bit north of here, works at home and was a bit lonely. He loves hiking, and he was pleased when someone invited him to go on a hike in the woods with the men's group at his UU church. He was happy at the prospect of getting away from his lonely desk and into the beautiful natural world with men who shared his love of our landscape. He came back from this hike deeply disappointed. He was distressed that the sole topic of conversation among the group before, during, and after the hike was how the environment was being destroyed. The men tried to top each other's stories with tales of gloom and despair. Have you ever been in a group like that? Cheerful, isn't it? So poor Bill, he came home determined to continue hiking only on his own. Those stories of gloom and despair, starting in the 1980s, much science fiction took a turn away from the uplifting and optimistic themes of its classic era, and fantasy fiction turned away from the idealized medieval themes that had dominated that genre. A huge subgenre emerged that now emphasized a dark view of the future and of human nature. These stories came to dominate the whole field of speculative fiction. They are known collectively as grimdark. Is that showing? Great. In grimdark, the glass is always half empty. It's been defined as a subgenre of speculative fiction with a tone, style, or setting that is particularly dystopian, amoral, or violent. Fiction where nobody is honorable and might is right. The notion that the actions of one person can do little to improve this world, which is in decline, that the forces of evil and inertia and temptation will ensure that all of us are doomed. This is very popular. These grimdark stories depict human beings as fundamentally selfish, cynical, and disillusioned. A prime example of grimdark, I've been told, is Game of Thrones. Everyone is out for her or himself or their own tribe, and no one can be trusted to be consistently good. It provides a deeply cynical view of human nature. The view that the actions of one person can do little to improve this world. The best we can hope for is a little struggle to oppose danger and maybe rescue a few others for a brief time. In grimdark stories, good characters inevitably make bad decisions, and the truly great people suffer because of their hope. Other massively popular grimdark stories, such as Breaking Bad and The Walking Dead, take place in universes in which cruelty is a given and social systems are destined to betray and disappoint. In reaction to grimdark, a genre that has emerged is called Noblebright. And this is the notion that the actions of one person, one hero, can make a difference, that even if the person is flawed and opposed by strong forces, he can and he wants to rise to heroic actions that, even if they may cost him his life, improve the lives of others. In Noble Bright stories, the glass is always half full. Noble Bright is essentially hopeful, both about the potential for human flourishing and the heroic possibilities of human nature. An example of a classic Noble Bright story is the King Arthur legend. These stories focus on good versus evil, where the hero often defeats the villain and all of society's ills are fixed because of it. A new-ish category of stories that has only recently been identified and named has been held up by Alexandra Rowland, a fantasy writer, and this to me is by far the most interesting. It is Hopepunk. Hopepunk isn't so much a genre as it is a perspective on stories, one that's optimistic, and it's about people fighting for change despite overwhelming odds. I am crazy about Hopepunk. Hopepunk is a worldview that argues that the fight to build positive social systems is a fight worth fighting. It has an emphasis on community building through cooperation rather than conflict, and it's a depiction of the fight to achieve human progress as something permanently ongoing with no fixed happy end. It has a sense of self-awareness about weaponizing kindness and optimism in the face of that fight. Rowland said that Hopepunk fits between grimdark and Noble Bright, between hopeless dystopianism and idealistic utopianism. Hopepunk acknowledges that the world can be bad, but believes that people should fight to make it better. She says, Hopepunk reminds us that all is not lost, that we can bring goodness back. As examples of the Hopepunk attitude in fiction and in history, she cites Gandhi. Nonviolent resistance is definitely part of Hopepunk, she says. So many artists and legendary figures are also Hopepunk. John Lennon, Robin Hood, Harriet Tubman, all of these amazing historical figures who've looked at a terrible atrocity that was happening around them and said, I'm going to say something about it, or I'm going to do something about it. I'm going to potentially put myself in the line of fire to get it done because this is important. Hopepunk is as much a mood and a spirit as an actual literary movement. It's a narrative message of keep fighting no matter what, and keep hoping no matter what. Hopepunk says that genuinely and sincerely caring about something requires bravery and strength. Hopepunk is never about submission or acceptance. It's about standing up and fighting for what you believe in, and it's about standing up for other people. It's about demanding a better, kinder world and truly believing that we can get there if we care about each other with every ounce of energy in our hearts. And Hopepunk does not envision an end where all fighting will be over forever. It depicts the fight, the struggle to achieve human progress as something permanent with no fixed happy end. Rowland wrote, Hopepunk says that kindness and softness doesn't equal weakness, and that in this world of brutal cynicism and nihilism, being kind is a political act. Alexandra Rowland came up with the concept of Hopepunk in 2017, besides offering a critique of the unrelenting pessimism of grimdark. She was also responding to the real-world mood after the 2016 presidential election. She says, I was having a lot of feelings about the catastrophizing and despair that I was seeing amongst my social circles at the time. Everything was new and different suddenly. But Hopepunk's roots as a form of literary resistance aren't necessarily recent. She says, Hopepunk is a feeling. The feeling has been around for ages. I didn't invent the feeling. I just put a word on it. All throughout history, you can find examples of people standing up to terrifying regimes and holding the line against them and surviving against all odds just by force of sheer bloody-minded obstinacy. Hopepunk is a radical call to arms for us to imagine a better world. Its message is that we must fall in love with the world that we so deeply wish to change. That when we go for a hike in the woods, we should spend our energy loving the trees that we are seeing. Its message is also that people are neither all good, like the heroes of Noblebright, nor all bad, like the cynical anti-heroes of grimdark. We are capable of great atrocities and amazing kindness, Hopepunk says. We have the capacity to choose how to act to create the world we want to see, even though we know that nothing is guaranteed. Hopepunk is not a glass half empty or glass half full kind of thing. It's acknowledging that there's water in the glass, looking at it clearly and with an open mind, and figuring out what we can do with this little bit of water. Roland says, Hopepunk knows that everything is impermanent and that nothing is promised. Noblebright says that we can eventually win the fight and have a happy ending, and Hopepunk says that there's no such thing as winning, and we have to keep doing the work every single day for the rest of civilization. It's hard in our cynical era to relate to the dazzling optimism of Unitarians in the 1880s with their belief in the continuity of human development in all worlds, or the progress of mankind onward and upward forever. That is an example of Noblebright, the bedrock belief in the perfectibility of human beings, the achievability of world peace and unity. Today, like those hikers who spent the whole hike bemoaning how awful everything was, I believe the Unitarian Universalist world is in the grip of grimdark, a very pessimistic mood focused on injustices, disasters, victimhood, with a very strange resistance, not just to the idea of perfectibility, but even to the possibility of improvement. In an issue not long ago in the UU World magazine, an article about the struggle for racial justice starts out, "This is not a game. We are not going to win." That's not the Unitarian Universalism that I signed up for, where we are defeated before we even start. That sounds an awful lot like Calvinist predeterminism to me. I want a faith, a world, an existence where victory may not be guaranteed, but where with community, grit, and loyalty, even the most imperfect of us may find in ourselves a nobility of spirit, a determination to continue to fight every day to make the world a better place. And not alone, but with comrades. Alexandra Rowland said, community is a huge part of Hopepunk. We accomplish great things when we form bonds with each other. We're stronger, we can build higher, and we can take better care of each other. I'd like to conclude with a shining example of Hopepunk from the Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers movie. This was actually not written by Tolkien, it was written by the screenwriters, but it's just, well, you'll see for yourself. In their desperate quest to defy Sauron and destroy the One Ring by climbing Mount Doom and throwing the ring into the volcano, the little hobbits, particularly Frodo and Sam, struggle at every step of their trek. The question of whether Frodo will succumb to the evil lure of the ring as he carries it to Mordor is perpetually in doubt. Yet the two friends survive by leaning on one another and continually choosing to fight despite highly uncertain outcomes. Ultimately, Sam and Frodo are able to succeed. I hope that's not a spoiler, because they remain true to their well-established Hobbit values of love, community, and friendship as they fight. As Frodo is about to succumb, to surrender to exhaustion and heart sickness, Sam gives an amazing speech about the power of stories to inspire courageous resistance and inspires Frodo to continue. I'm going to read this speech aloud first, and then we'll show the video clip from the movie because it's a little hard to hear it in spots. But this, I believe, is Hopepunk at its most inspiring. This is what I hope our faith will teach, what keeps us going, what could ultimately save our democracy and our planet. Let it be said of us that we knew that there's something good in the world and that it's worth fighting for, and that we did fight for it. So here's the script. It's like in the great stories, Mr. Frodo, the ones that really mattered. Full of darkness and danger they were, and sometimes you didn't want to know the end because how could the end be happy? How could the world go back to the way it was when so much bad had happened? But in the end, it's only a passing thing, this shadow. Even darkness must pass. A new day will come, and when the sun shines, it will shine out the clearer. Those were the stories that stayed with you, that meant something, even if you were too small to understand why. But I think, Mr. Frodo, I do understand. I know now. Folk in those stories had lots of chances of turning back, only they didn't. They kept going because they were holding on to something. That there's some good in this world, Mr. Frodo, and it's worth fighting for. So let's watch that video and keep your eyes open, friends, for examples of Hopepunk.
I can't do this, Sam. I know. It's all wrong. By rights, we shouldn't even be here. But we are. It's like in the great stories, Mr. Frodo. The ones that really mattered. Full of darkness and danger they were. And sometimes you didn't want to know the end. Because how could the end be happy? How could the world go back to the way it was when so much bad had happened? But in the end, it's only a passing thing. This shadow. Even darkness must pass. A new day will come. And when the sun shines, it'll shine out the clearer. Those were the stories that stayed with you. That meant something. Even if you were too small to understand why. But I think, Mr. Frodo, I do understand. I know now. Folk in those stories had lots of chances of turning back, only they didn't. They kept going. Because they were holding on to something. What are we holding on to, Sam? There's some good in this world, Mr. Frodo. And it's worth fighting for.
Now please stand as you're willing and able to sing our closing hymn, Love Will Guide Us, number 131 in our gray hymnal. The words will appear on the screen. After the service is over today, please immediately exit through the foyer. You are encouraged to greet one another outside. Coffee and tea will be served outside in the breezeway between our two buildings. All those who are attending from home or elsewhere are invited to greet each other during our virtual coffee hour on Zoom. The link to join is in this morning's email, and the password is coffee, spelled with a capital C. Now we will extinguish our chalice with our words. Help us to be always hopeful gardeners of the Spirit, who know that without darkness nothing comes to birth, as without light nothing flowers.